There are financial systems built on things that move, and there are financial systems built on things that stay. The difference is not immediately obvious if you are only watching the surface. Both produce activity, both generate wealth, both attract people who are serious about preserving what they have built over a lifetime. But if you look beneath the activity, if you trace the foundation upon which everything rests, you begin to see a fundamental divergence in logic. Some systems are anchored in promises, in expectations, in calculations about what might happen next. Others are anchored in objects, in land, in structures, in things you can walk across or stand inside or pass down to someone who will still be able to touch them decades from now. Sydney belongs to the second category. And understanding what that means requires setting aside much of what the modern financial world has trained us to value. I've spent many years watching how wealth moves through cities, watching how it is created, how it is protected, and how it is lost. What I have come to understand is that the most enduring forms of wealth are rarely the most liquid. They are not the forms that can be converted to cash at a moment's notice, that can be transferred across borders with a keystroke, that exist primarily as entries in a ledger somewhere. Those forms have their uses, certainly, but they are vulnerable in ways that become apparent only when the ground shifts. When circumstances change in ways that no one anticipated. When the assumptions underlying the numbers turn out to be less solid than they appeared, the wealth that survives across generations tends to be heavier. It tends to be slower. It tends to be composed of things that cannot be easily moved, because they were never meant to be moved. And Sydney, perhaps more than any other city I have observed, has organized its financial life around this principle. The first thing you notice when you spend time here is the relationship between money and land. It is not a casual relationship. It is not a matter of investment strategy or portfolio allocation. It is something closer to identity. The people who have built substantial wealth in this city have done so, in most cases, by acquiring ground, by taking ownership of physical space and holding it, not trading it, not leveraging it, not using it as collateral for increasingly complex arrangements, but simply holding it, waiting, allowing time to do what time does to things that are scarce and necessary. This patience is not passive. It requires a particular kind of discipline to resist the constant pressure to do something with an asset, to trade it for something else, to extract value from it in ways that might compromise its long-term integrity. The financial culture here has developed a resistance to that pressure. There is an understanding, passed down through families and firms that have operated for generations, that the true value of ownership lies not in what you can do with something today, but in what it will still be worth when you are no longer here to make decisions about it. This creates a very different tempo than what you find in cities organized around trading. In those places, the measure of success is activity, volume, the ability to move quickly, to anticipate shifts, to be positioned correctly before everyone else arrives. Here, the measure of success is stillness, the ability to acquire something of genuine worth and then resist every temptation to let it go. The wealthiest families are not the ones who made the cleverest trades. They are the ones who made the wisest purchases and then did nothing. Or rather, they did the hardest thing of all, which is to wait. Walking through the older neighborhoods, the ones where money has been present for generations rather than years, you can see the physical evidence of this philosophy. The buildings are solid. The land beneath them has been held by the same interest for longer than most people can remember. The transactions that occur are infrequent and deliberate. When something changes hands, it is an event, not a routine occurrence. And the prices reflect this scarcity, not the artificial scarcity of things that are withheld from the market to drive up demand, but the genuine scarcity of things that their owners have no intention of selling because selling would mean giving up something that cannot be replaced. This relationship with physical assets extends beyond land into other categories of ownership. The infrastructure of the city, the commercial buildings, the industrial facilities, the properties that generate income through use rather than speculation, all of these are held in ways that prioritize continuity over liquidity. The people who own them are not looking for exits. They are not building toward a sale. They are building toward a transfer, a handover to the next generation that will continue the same patient work of maintenance and collection. There is something deeply reassuring about this approach if you have lived long enough to see the alternatives fail. I have watched fortunes disappear in cities where wealth was held in forms that seemed solid at the time, but turned out to be built on nothing more than collective belief. When that belief wavered, the wealth evaporated. There was nothing left to hold on to because there had never been anything physical to begin with, just numbers that everyone agreed to treat as real until they stopped agreeing. Sydney's wealth does not work this way. It is stubborn. It persists even when confidence falters, because its foundation is not confidence. Its foundation is matter, soil and stone and timber and steel. Things that do not care what anyone believes about them. Things that will still be there tomorrow regardless of what happens in the minds of investors or the calculations of analysts. This is not a guarantee against all forms of loss, of course. Nothing is. But it is a form of protection that abstract wealth simply cannot provide. The people who manage significant assets here understand this distinction intuitively. When they consider how to position what they have for the decades ahead, their first instinct is not to ask what will grow fastest. Their first instinct is to ask what will still be here, what will still be functioning, what will still be generating value through its mere existence rather than through clever manipulation. This leads them toward the tangible, toward the permanent, toward the things that require maintenance rather than management. Maintenance is an undervalued concept in modern finance. It lacks the excitement of growth, the drama of transformation, the appeal of disruption. But maintenance is what allows things to last. It is the quiet, ongoing work of keeping something in good condition so that it can continue to serve its purpose year after year. The financial culture of Sydney has elevated this work to a central position. The most respected stewards of wealth are not the ones who generated the highest returns in any given period. They are the ones who kept everything intact, who handed over to their successors something that was in the same condition or better than when they received it. This orientation toward preservation rather than maximization creates a particular kind of stability. The city does not experience the wild swings that characterize places where wealth is more fluid. There are no sudden booms driven by speculation, no devastating crashes when the speculation unwinds. The line moves more slowly, more steadily, in a direction that is determined by fundamental forces rather than by mood. The land becomes more valuable over time because the population grows and the supply does not. The buildings generate income because people need places to live and work and conduct their affairs. The wealth compounds not through brilliance, but through patience, through the simple act of holding on to things that matter. For those who have spent their lives accumulating something worth protecting, this stability is not boring. It is the whole point. The goal was never excitement. The goal was security. The knowledge that what you have built will not be swept away by forces beyond your control. That your children and their children will inherit something solid rather than something fragile. Sydney offers this knowledge in a way that few other places can match because the entire financial culture is organized around the same priority. There is a physicality to doing business here that reinforces this orientation. Meetings take place in rooms with views of the harbor, of the land, of the buildings that represent decades of patient accumulation. The conversations are grounded in specifics, in addresses and boundaries and square meters, in the condition of structures and the terms of leases and the history of ownership. Abstract financial instruments exist here as they do everywhere, but they are not the center of gravity. The center of gravity is always the thing itself, the asset that you can point to, that you can visit, that you can show to someone who wants to understand what they are considering. This tangibility provides a kind of discipline that is easy to lose when everything becomes abstract. When you are dealing with numbers on a screen, it is tempting to take risks that you would never take if you could see what you were risking. When the asset is physical, when it has a presence in the world that you can perceive with your senses, the decisions become more careful, more conservative, more aligned with the long-term thinking that preservation requires. You do not gamble with something you can touch in the same way you might gamble with something you have never seen. The families who have maintained their wealth across multiple generations in this city share certain habits that reflect this understanding. They visit their properties. They know the tenants. They understand the maintenance schedules and the capital requirements. They do not delegate the relationship with their assets to intermediaries who see only spreadsheets. They remain connected to the physical reality of what they own because that connection is what prevents the slow drift toward abstraction that has undermined so many fortunes elsewhere. This is not to say that Sydney is immune to the pressures that affect every financial center. The temptation to leverage, to speculate, to chase the next opportunity is always present. But the culture provides a counterweight, the weight of tradition, of example, of observed success over time. The young person entering the world of wealth management here does not see role models who made fortunes through aggressive trading. They see role models who built fortunes through patient acquisition and careful stewardship. The lesson is absorbed not through instruction, but through observation. This is how it is done. This is what works. This is what lasts. As the city continues to grow, as new wealth is created and new fortunes are built, this pattern repeats itself. The new money, in time, becomes old money. The recent acquisitions become long-term holdings. The instinct to trade gives way to the instinct to hold. And the cycle continues, each generation adding to what the previous generation accumulated, building something that becomes more substantial with each passing decade. The harbor reflects the light differently at different times of day. The buildings cast shadows that move across the streets. The ferries carry people from one shore to another as they have for longer than anyone alive can remember. And beneath all of this visible activity, the slower process of accumulation continues. Assets are held, properties are maintained, wealth is preserved in forms that do not depend on anyone's opinion or prediction or belief. There is a quietness to this preservation that is easy to overlook. It does not announce itself. It does not seek attention. It simply continues day after day, year after year. The patient work of keeping things intact so that they can be passed forward. The offices where this work is done are not flashy. The people who do it are not celebrities. The transactions are not newsworthy. But the result is a body of wealth that has proven remarkably durable through circumstances that destroyed more fragile arrangements. The sun sets over the western suburbs, and the city settles into its evening rhythm. The work of the day is finished, but the assets remain. The land is still there, beneath the buildings that stand upon it. The structures are still sound, still generating the income that justifies their existence. The families who own them are still holding, still waiting, still trusting in the logic that has served them for so long. And somewhere in the quiet offices where these matters are handled, the records are updated, the accounts are reconciled, and the slow process of accumulation continues. Not seeking attention, not requiring validation, just persisting, as solid things do, through whatever the world decides to bring next. The harbor water moves against the seawall. The lights come on across the skyline, and the weight of ownership remains anchored in place, doing what it has always done, which is simply to endure,